much better outcome than 2011. Much, even though it was the same basic scenario.
Coming up next on Scripps News Live, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer celebrating after the Senate approves the debt limit bill. Why some lawmakers are still unhappy and what it all means for student loan debt.
If we will not rescue him, he could die as a Russian soldier.
We're going to take you inside our year-long investigation following a Ukrainian teen after he was taken by Russian forces that targeted one of Ukraine's orphanages.
Strength of cyclones, typhoons, and hurricanes in the North Atlantic is threatening.
The U.S. Virgin Islands bracing for another hurricane season as climate change makes those storms even more volatile. The costs that they're facing and the possible solutions as they deal with vulnerable infrastructure. And today marks Gun Violence Awareness Day. We're going to speak with an expert about what lawmakers could do to make meaningful progress and help save lives. Scripps News Live begins right now. Hey there, welcome to Scripps News Live. Good to see you on this Friday. I'm Veronica Cruz. A potential economic crisis now averted after senators pass a debt ceiling bill. Final tally, 63-36. The Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 places a cap on non-defense spending, cuts some COVID-19 relief funds, and increases work requirements for some food stamp recipients. The debt ceiling bill is now on its way to the president's desk to be signed into law, and he's expected to do so tonight. Let's get right out to congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed, who's live right now on Capitol Hill. So, Nate, the Senate voted to send this Fiscal Responsibility Act to the president's desk. No changes, despite voting on 11 different amendments. So I got to ask you, why did all of those amendments fail?
Well, there was a strategic reason, Veronica, that all 11 of those amendment votes failed. This bill might be 99 pages, but an amendment ain't one. And the reason is, if this bill had been amended, it would have had to go back to the House of Representatives. As it stands, they were already supposed to be on recess this week. The only reason they stayed in town was to get this bill passed on to the U.S. Senate. Ultimately, the Senate last night, with all of those 11 amendment votes, all of them failed, and they were able to approve this bill as it was written. It's worth noting that this was a major win for President Biden. He is expected, of course, to sign this legislation at some point tonight, preventing a possible debt ceiling crisis. Take a listen.
I won't get ahead of the president, but what you can expect broadly is that this president will remind the American people what was on the line, what default would have meant for the American people, for small businesses, for families. And he'll also talk to the American people about the fact that when Democrats and Republicans come together, as he has brought them together, we can make things better for the American people and for the American economy.
And this is a major win not only for President Biden, but also for Speaker McCarthy, both of whom worked really hard on getting this passed. There were some defections from both conservative Republicans and progressive Democrats. Ultimately, turns out their votes weren't all that vital in terms of getting this passed, given that it passed the House and the Senate with bipartisan support.
All right, I just wanted to circle back to something that you said earlier, Nate, which was this bill is 99 pages and an amendment ain't one. I don't think you're supposed to say that unless you wrap it. I mean, then you can use it, but very clever. I heard
do not
that.
Wrap, Veronica. It's not happening. Not going to happen.
It's Friday. You know, always worth a shot. Try to get you to do something fun. All right, remind us right here, because obviously, Nate, it appears that the crisis has been averted, but we are going to be talking about this yet again at some point, because as we know, this situation seems to come up time and time again. We kick the can down the road. So how much longer do we have until we're discussing this again? A year, 2 years?
Well, that bill raises the debt ceiling until January of 2025, which means that it's going to be after the 2024 presidential election during what's called the lame duck period. So either President Biden will be re-sworn into office on January 20th of 2025, or another presidential candidate will be up on the stage here at the Capitol taking the oath of office. And so at some point in December of 2024, senators and representatives are going to need to get serious about passing another debt ceiling extension. They could run into an issue, though, which is a number of Republicans were not happy about the way that this unfolded. Take a listen.
This is a budget of political compromise where people have lost sight of what the country needs. We need safety and security. To my House colleagues, I can't believe you did this. To the Speaker, I know you got a tough job. I like you, but the party of Ronald Reagan is dying.
And look, though this bill passed in the House of Representatives and the Senate, there's no indication that senators and representatives won't remember the emotions they feel in this moment, people like Senator Lindsey Graham. And keep that in mind when in 2 years they have the opportunity to do this all again. No indication yet of whether it will be as easy next time or whether we could see something like what happened in 2011, where Speaker John Boehner had to step down over a revolt within the Republican Party. Of course, Kevin McCarthy might be in the clear for now at this point. There are no active measures that we know of to try and oust him as the leader of the House Republican Conference.
All right, Nathaniel Reed on Capitol Hill. Nate, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Well, opposition is growing against President Biden's student loan forgiveness program. The Senate voted to block the relief plan, which cancels up to $20,000 in debt for millions of borrowers. Now, the House passed the same legislation last week. A few Democrats broke rank with the president and signed on to the bill, and he's promised to veto it, but the plan is still in jeopardy. The Supreme Court is set to rule on 2 legal challenges later on this month or in early July. So what does all of this mean for you? For that, we're going to bring in student loan expert and author of How to Appeal for More College Financial Aid, Mark Kantrowitz. Mark, thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
So we have student loan payments resuming, a Supreme Court and congressional challenge to Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. I mean, it's a lot. It's definitely a lot to keep track of. For all of those that might be nervous right now, Mark, what is the main thing to keep in mind right now?
Well, student loan repayment will restart in September, regardless of what happens in the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court will affect whether the president's student loan forgiveness plan goes into effect. And that would forgive $10,000 or $20,000 per borrower, depending on whether they received a federal Pell Grant while they were in college.
All right, so you're saying that it's going to restart in September regardless of what happens with the Supreme Court. What comes next, though? Is there a chance that the president's loan forgiveness plan survives?
Well, the Supreme Court case depends on 2 main issues. One is whether the plaintiffs have legal standing to bring that lawsuit. And there's an issue of third-party legal standing that is probably going to dominate that question. If the lawsuits have legal standing, then it'll be considered on the merits. I think it's probably going to be a 5-4 decision. It's unclear whether it's going to be 5-4 in favor or 5-4 against. The Biden administration's greatest chance for success has to do with the legal standing issue. There's some question about whether the plaintiffs have legal standing. If it gets to the merits phase, it's much less certain whether the Biden administration will win their case.
So I know that you have written a book on all of this, and like you were saying, repayments will start again September 1st regardless. How should folks get prepared right now? What should they be doing?
Well, if they have questions, they should contact their loan servicer now instead of waiting to the last minute. The phone lines are likely to be clogged at the last minute, especially since Congress didn't appropriate additional money to enable longer call center hours. If you're struggling to repay your student loans, you can continue a personal pause, even if the repayment restarts. And you can do this through an economic hardship deferment, unemployment deferment, or income-driven repayment plans or general forbearances. With the income-driven repayment plan, if your income is less than 150% of the poverty line, your monthly payment will be $0. There's also a new income-driven repayment plan which will go into effect probably July 1 of next year, which will cut the monthly payments on undergraduate debt in half and provide some additional flexibilities to borrowers, including if your income is less than 225% of the poverty line, your monthly payment will be $0 under that new plan.
You know, the price of college continues to increase, which is going to mean more student loans down the road. Is this sustainable? I mean, what do you make of the education system right now in the United States?
Well, there's too much reliance on student loan debt, especially for low-income students. Now, the President's Student Loan Forgiveness Plan is a one-time event, so even if it passes the U.S. Supreme Court, it does nothing for future borrowers who are unlikely to get forgiveness in the future. More needs to be done to increase the federal Pell Grant and other grants for low-income students to make college more affordable.
I wanted to switch gears for a second and ask you quickly about artificial intelligence, because I'm sure it's going to change the landscape of the workforce. And I'm a parent, and I wonder all the time how I should advise my child in terms of what he should be studying as he, gets older. What are your thoughts in terms of artificial intelligence and how it could be changing, not just the workforce, but also education?
Well, I have several patents in statistical language modeling, so I do know a little bit about these large language models. They're essentially computerized plagiarists. They copy what they see everywhere on the internet, and they paraphrase it, writing something new. So it's no different than copying from Wikipedia or some other source. And so students should avoid relying too much on ChatGPT, Bard, or one of these other large language models to write their essays. And I'm recommending that scholarship providers and educators submit their prompts to these large language models to see what essays they write so that they can recognize if a student essentially cheated on their assignment. It is potentially going to eliminate certain types of jobs which are involve simplistic writing. It's not going to affect the jobs of journalists because they write about new stuff and ChatGPT only writes about old stuff. But you are going to see some simplistic writing of email messages and short summaries be done by these machines. The problem is that sometimes they hallucinate or intentionally lie when writing an answer to a question. I myself have noticed this. And it's going to take a lot more development before they can develop output that you can rely on. There was one case reported in the New York Times where an attorney used ChatGPT to write law briefs, and the result was fabricated cases and cited cases that just didn't exist.
I don't think that we can rely on it quite yet, but to your point, it's going to be really interesting to see how the job market changes, which jobs will be eliminated, and then, in turn, what areas people will be chasing in terms of a career or a profession. Mark Kantrowitz, thank you so much for your time and your insight today. We appreciate it. So to come on Scripps News Live, Jason Bellini is going to take us inside a Scripps News investigation. We'll follow a Ukrainian teen from an orphanage to his abduction by Russian forces. We'll have his story for you straight ahead.
This is an important message for anyone and everyone on or eligible for Medicare. If Medicare is important to you, then you need to hear this message because Medicare benefits matter to millions of Americans. Did you know Medicare has different parts, including Medicare Part A and Part B, often called Original Medicare? And then there's Medicare Part C, representing Medicare Advantage plans, and Part D for prescription drug coverage. Call 800-912-2786 now for your free Medicare coverage checkup. We can look up your plan and see if you're missing out on a plan with extra benefits or if your income qualifies you to reduce costs on your prescription medications. Did you know there are different enrollment periods, like the Medicare annual enrollment period, when beneficiaries can enroll in or change coverage? But there are also certain conditions or qualifications that may allow you to qualify for a special enrollment period any time of the year. So call the number on your screen now for your free Medicare coverage checkup. This is a free service that you can call at absolutely no cost to you.
I'm on Medicare. I called to see if my income qualified for lower prescription medication costs. The friendly agent was very knowledgeable, and I found out I qualified for a special enrollment period, so I'm so glad I called.
We can look up your plan and see if you are missing out on a plan with extra benefits. We can also check to see if your income qualifies you to reduce the cost of your prescription medications. And we can even tell you if you qualify for a special enrollment period. It's your free Medicare coverage checkup at absolutely no cost to you. Just call 800-912-2786 and you can speak with a licensed agent who can check up on your plan and answer your questions. The Medicare Benefits and Questions line is open and anyone on or eligible for Medicare can call. The call and Medicare coverage checkup is free with no obligation. Call now. We love talking to people with Medicare, and the call is free. Just call 800-912-2786. 800-912-2786.
Keep your dog safe anywhere with the world's smartest fence. Halo Collar is a virtual fence inside a collar. Easily create multiple fences in the app. No installation required. Teach them to keep away from danger and come back to safety. Safely give your dog a life off leash. Wherever you go, it's a whole new world for you and your dog. Learn more at halocollar.com.
All month long, Scripps News is shining a light on awareness.
The state is saying to us, it's fine if you're gay or a gay family, as long as we don't see you.
Sharing stories of perseverance.
You can be 17, you can be 18, you can be 19, and your opinion matters.
And going inside the communities now fighting for their rights.
You are doing irreversible damage.
They want silence, and we will not be complicit in our eradication.
Scripps News presents the stories of Pride Month, all month long, only on Scripps News.
Since invading Ukraine, Russia has been accused of abducting thousands of Ukrainian children. The International Criminal Court has declared this mass abduction a war crime and has issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin. It's held him personally responsible for the ongoing abduction of children. Our correspondent Jason Bellini has been tracking the story of one of these young people for more than a year now.
This is Dennis. At an orphanage in Ukraine in May of 2022, on TikTok responding to the question, Ukraine or Russia?
They kill, they rape, they steal people. Putin doesn't care. Therefore, I will without hesitation say that I am for Ukraine.
That was before Russian forces took him. This is Dennis this winter being held in a Russian-run school shown on a Russian propaganda network.
Russians are generally very kind people, and the Ukrainians are ready to tear you apart.
His is a story we've been following exclusively since the start of the war, after Russian forces quickly overtook the southern city of Kherson. In March of 2022, as fighting raged around them, we reached the orphanage where Dennis lived. The orphanage director, Volodymyr Sahydok, hiding with 50 kids in a crowded room.
Hello, what is your name?
Dennis, a 16-year-old, spoke for the group.
Currently, we're in Kherson. We see airplanes flying. We hear explosions very well, usually at night or early morning.
War had made Dennis a leader.
Older children my age help the teachers with the kids. We don't tell them very much about these events because they panic. We're trying to divert their attention, play with them, watch cartoons.
He seemed wise beyond his years.
We're surrounded, we're under a blockade. Now there's no food supply. Maybe the USA, with its political influence, can somehow negotiate with the Russian military to allow humanitarian aid.
He was also a patriot.
Many thanks to the USA, because if it were not for its weapons, not for its help, then Ukraine could already be under the Russian flag.
We would lose contact with the orphanage as the war raged on. Then, in the fall, we finally got a message from the director. The Russians were taking Ukrainian children away. He had hidden the ones he cared for in homes in Kherson, but the Russians had taken the older boys, including Dennis. It wouldn't be until after Ukraine's army liberated Kherson and Russian forces retreated that Scripps News would learn and be the first to report the chilling details. Traversing a war-ravaged road lined with landmines, we made it to Kherson and finally met in person the orphanage director, Volodymyr Sahydok. He told the story of what happened, how last summer, armed Russians wearing face masks showed up at the orphanage, forcing Sahydok to show them where the children lived and taking files on them. And then the Russians returned a second time. The second time, 14 journalists, security services, and soldiers came, he said. Naturally, the children were scared, as well as the staff, but we withstood the pressure with dignity. Sahidok says the Russians tried to film Dennis for propaganda, but he refused. The boys were patriotic. They said, we don't want to be filmed. We don't want to talk. And they didn't give an interview or anything, he says.
No interview. Нет.
Throughout occupied Kherson, children were disappearing. Sahidok took us to a church where another group of orphans, infants and toddlers, were hidden until Russian soldiers found them and took them away. He suspected the Russians would come back for the children at his orphanage, so he closed it and secretly sent them into hiding in homes of volunteers and teachers. But Dennis, he ultimately could not save. The Russians took him along with 3 of the older boys.
Are you worried about Dennis?
Очень. Very, he said back in November.
Why?
Because, he said, these are our children. These are our children would become the rallying cry of the Ukrainian government, which estimates 10,000 Ukrainian children have been forcibly removed. Some, Russia changed their names, birth dates, and put up for adoption. Others taken to Russian-run camps and schools. One of those Russian-run schools is where we next saw Dennis. Under what pressure, we don't know. Dennis appeared on Russian state TV. Today, we visited one of the schools from the Kherson region, the Russian reporter says. Orphans who were evacuated from Kherson live here. Today, they got humanitarian aid. He asks the school's director about the students' mental condition. At first, they were upset, she says. Now, when they saw that they're surrounded by love, care, and attention, they calmed down. And then Dennis answering the reporter's question. What do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to serve in the army. I'm ready to serve Russia.
In another interview in April, it appears that Dennis might be reading as he repeats Putin propaganda on Russian TV that Kyiv and the West are the terrorists killing civilians.
We have made a historic choice to be together with Russia.
Back in Kherson, a city under relentless Russian shelling, Sahidok had seen the videos of Dennis. This video could have been made at gunpoint or under the pressure of those people who worked with him from the FSB. The FSB is Russia's security service. He'd also exchanged some texts with the boy. I assume that our chats were monitored by the FSB, he says. At this point, Dennis's story had reached Kyiv, where Ukraine's intense efforts to bring home its children were having some limited success. Save Ukraine, an organization devoted to rescuing the stolen children, had arranged through secret means the rescue of several small groups. Mykola Kuleba, who heads the organization, discussed with us a risky plan in the making to rescue Dennis as well.
Clock's ticking. He's going to turn 18 in July.
Yes, it's mean that very soon he can be sent to Russian army. If we will not rescue him, he could die as a Russian soldier.
During our interview, he called a staff member for an update on Dennis's case.
Are there some young people who've been Russified and who don't want to go home?
Yes, yeah, we have these cases when relatives asking us to return these kids, and we negotiate with these children, and they tell no. We don't want.
Save Ukraine would send a small group of relatives and guardians into Russia, including Dennis's godmother. They flew to Moscow to try to claim another group of children, but the plan, at least for Dennis, would go terribly wrong. As seen in video released by Moscow. Save Ukraine says at the airport, Russian authorities detained his godmother, who endured 2 days of interrogation and threats of imprisonment. They did not allow her to travel to Dennis.
If she was successful in getting to Dennis, do you think Dennis would have gone back to Ukraine with her?
With his consent, the Russians would have no choice but to let him go, says Sahidok. I think they decided not to risk it and didn't even give them a chance to meet.
How do you feel right now about the situation?
I'm so sad that he's not coming back, he says. I hope that he will do everything possible to return to Ukraine. Would Dennis have gone home with his godmother, joining the convoy of 12 other children, had she managed to reach him? Save Ukraine doesn't know the answer.
I don't know what really happened inside him. It's one thing what happened outside, what he expressed and doing something, how Russian propaganda influenced on him. He's a child.
Dennis, like thousands of other Ukrainian children, a victim of Russian atrocities, in which Russia treats them as spoils of war. Jason Bellini, Scripps News, Kyiv, Ukraine.
Still to come on Scripps News Live, islands in the Caribbean have been bracing for impact this hurricane season. We're going to take you to the U.S. Virgin Islands to find out how climate change has been threatening the power grid there.
You're looking pretty good, Mr. Johnson. But we need to take some x-rays today.
That's why.
Yes, x-rays are expensive, but the front desk said you recently enrolled in a Medicare Advantage plan with extra benefits that now cover today's x-rays and cleaning costs.
Wow, okay.
Well, Medicare Parts A and B do not cover your routine dental coverage like cleanings, fillings, or x-rays. Yes, you have a Medicare Part C plan, commonly called Medicare Advantage. Medicare Part C plans cover everything in Part A and Part B, plus extra benefits like dental, vision, and hearing.
Wow. That's great that my plan includes dental coverage that helps pay for these costs.
Yes, Mr. Johnson. A Medicare Part C plan could include dental coverage that pays for routine dental exams and teeth cleanings, dental x-rays, fillings, tooth extractions, root canals, dentures, implants, and crowns.
If you're losing coverage, moving, or new to Medicare, call to speak with a licensed insurance agent. You don't get a plan with these benefits automatically, so it's always good to call to see if there's a plan with extra benefits available in your zip code. If you don't have a Medicare Part C plan, call now because there may be plans available with additional benefits that are simply not covered under Medicare Parts A and B, like routine dental coverage. In fact, 24 million Medicare beneficiaries do not have any dental coverage. Here's the good news. If you're on Medicare, you can call even if you called last year. We will check to see if there is a Part C plan available in your area with additional benefits. Remember, you don't get Medicare Part C benefits automatically, so call now for your free 2023 no-obligation Medicare benefits review. Just call 800-614-5203. 800-614-5203.
Are you or a loved one between the ages of 50 to 80 years old? If you are younger than 80 years old, do you receive Social Security, disability, or Medicare? If you answered yes, you may qualify for $30,000 in funeral insurance for only pennies a day. The average funeral costs around $11,000, and Social Security only pays $255, leaving your loved ones to pay the balance. Call now to see if you qualify for $30,000 in funeral expense coverage from Senior Legacy Life. Your rate will never increase, your benefits will never decrease, and there is no medical exam, even if you have a pre-existing disease or illness. Don't be a financial burden to your family. Lock in your rate by completing an application over the phone right now. Will you qualify for funeral insurance up to $30,000 for only pennies a day? Find out by calling Senior Legacy Life.
Call 1-800-300-5808 to speak with a licensed insurance agent. That's 1-800-300-5808.
Hey there, welcome back to Scripps News Live. I'm Veronica Cruz. It is nice to see you today. Here are some of the other stories that we are keeping an eye on for you right now. A federal judge has recused himself from overseeing Walt Disney's lawsuit against Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Chief District Judge Mark Walker said it's because a relative owns 30 shares of Disney stock and not because of reasons cited by DeSantis. Walker previously denied a motion from DeSantis' legal team. They claim that Walker lacked impartiality due to his ruling against DeSantis in previous cases. So one of the largest military installations in the world is getting a new name today. North Carolina's Fort Bragg will now become Fort Liberty. The change follows a push to rename bases that are named after Confederate leaders. And the base is currently named after General Braxton Bragg, who was criticized for losing several key battles during the Civil War. Fort Bragg is among 9 bases a congressional commission proposed renaming. 7-time Super Bowl winner Tom Brady is saying that he has made his decision. He is sticking with it. The 45-year-old retired from professional football a second time this past February after 23 seasons in the NFL. And he told Sports Illustrated that he's certain he won't be lacing up his cleats again. Brady is due to start as a Fox Sports broadcaster in 2024, but for now, he says that he's looking forward to other ventures and spending more time with his children. So the Atlantic hurricane season is now underway through the end of November, and already we have our very first tropical storm. Arlene is now swirling in the Gulf of Mexico, but there is no significant threat to land right now. Still, with climate change causing more powerful storms, many islands are left asking, are we ready for the next big one? Scripps News national correspondent Amber Strong brings us part one of her series looking into climate change's impact on one Caribbean island and the race to find a solution.
The U.S. Virgin Islands, a paradise rich with crystal clear waters and even richer in culture. But residents here say there's a price to paradise.
Hurricane survivors in the U.S. Virgin Islands describe the devastation there as apocalyptic.
Catastrophic storms and power outages crippling daily life and often leaving the 100,000 Americans who call it home in the dark. Sometimes even when there are no storms at all.
But the masses of people here are struggling.
Clarence Payne, a former senator who's led protests against the territory's only power supplier, says the Water and Power Authority, or WAPA, is unreliable with regular blackouts and unpredictable costs.
We pay the highest rates under the U.S. flag. Higher than Hawaii, higher than Puerto Rico, higher than Guam.
In 2022, the cost was about 41 cents per kilowatt hour. That's 3 times the cost of power than their mainland counterparts. Payne says the price of power plus the overall cost of living makes things difficult for many.
When I moved back home to the Virgin Islands in 2007, I met a person who had 3 jobs. 3 jobs.
I don't even know how you manage it.
Exactly.
Decades of mismanagement and costly business deals has led to millions of dollars in debt for the partial government, partially private agency. Payne says that's part of the problem, calling for federal oversight.
There's a lot of back and forth, who's in charge of what, who's going to fund what, who's responsible for what. It's just so much to unravel.
Christopher Burgess, director of the Island Energy Program at RMI, has studied power in the Caribbean and says the fact that the USVI has no connection to major power grids in the mainland adds to the problem.
They have to generate their own power. And for decades and decades, that's been by burning diesel, heavy fuel oil, and most recently propane.
Costs that are volatile and unpredictable, especially since the island's refinery temporarily closed in 2012 and again in 2021 after a damning EPA report. That, plus the ever-growing threat of climate change, makes the need for action vital.
The volatility and the strength of cyclones, typhoons, and hurricanes in the North Atlantic is threatening. And sea level rise along with that really puts a lot of pressure on infrastructure in the islands.
It's a reality that has plagued current Governor Albert Bryan Jr.'s time in office.
Taking everything that you've learned, are you ready for the next big storm or the next 2 big storms?
I think we're prepared now for another storm. We have a lot of the infrastructure in place, but every day we get a little bit stronger.
Ahead in part 2 of this series, Amber explains how the island is turning to alternative energy and how it's saving a school tens of thousands of dollars. That's coming up at 4 p.m. Eastern. The first Friday in June marks the start of Gun Violence Awareness Month. More than 300 people are directly impacted by gun violence every day. That's according to the Brady campaign. A family in Nashville, Tennessee is one of them, and they're mourning the death of a 4-year-old girl who was shot and killed Tuesday while riding in the back seat of a car with 2-year-old twin boys. The 22-year-old driver was also injured. Police are searching for the suspects. They say it looks like it was a targeted attack. 114 children have been killed so far this year by gunfire. That's according to the Gun Violence Archive. The mayor of Indianapolis, like other public officials across the country right now, fed up with the ongoing epidemic of gun violence. Mayor Joe Hogsett announced a plan last week to regulate guns that he hopes will help combat violence. It includes banning military assault-style weapons, raising the age to buy a gun from 18 to 21, and ending permitless carry in Marion County, Indiana.
That will help us take the worst of the worst off our streets, along with the weapons of death that they peddle to our residents.
None of us were really for going away from the permits to carry weapons. I still think that was a mistake. I'm hoping that can be reversed.
Hogsett says he's going to protect the rights of law-abiding gun owners. Now, if the ordinances are approved by the Indianapolis City Council, they can't be enforced unless the state legislature also approves them. Nick Wilson is the Senior Director for Gun Violence Prevention at the Center for American Progress and joins me now live. Nick, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me on this exciting Wear Orange Day.
You know, I wanted to ask you specifically about Gun Violence Awareness Day. I know that you're wearing orange for it. And also just the broader awareness month. Does this actually help reduce shootings? Because I feel like as a journalist, this is a story that we cover day in and day out, and it feels as though we're seeing mass shootings across the country, you know, if not weekly, somewhat daily in some instances.
That's a great question. What we're trying to do on this day, which started in 2015, is the 9th year, where we're trying to honor survivors of gun violence and victims of gun violence in honor of Padilla Pendleton, who was killed in 2013, a week after performing at President Obama's inauguration. And so today's a day to really honor the victims, but also to try to remind people that gun violence really impacts every community, whether it's urban, rural, or suburban, and that we need to join together in solidarity for the victims of gun violence and advocate for stronger gun laws. You know, just wearing a pin or wearing a shirt or changing your avatar might not make a difference, but if we all collect together and show our voice and pass stronger gun laws, we know that those gun deaths will continue to decline.
You know, we're always left asking the same question after every horrible gun story. We were just talking about, you know, children who are killed by gun violence. We're always asking, how can we stop this? How do we stop the shootings? I want to play you something that Chris Brown said when asked the very same question in an interview here on Scripps News, and she's with Brady. Take a listen to this.
We have folks in Congress today, far too many, who run on the idea that they need guns, they need God, and they need country. And they don't care about the consequences of that. They don't care about what happens at the polls. In the end, we as Americans have to stand up, look at the record of these individuals who we are putting in office, and understand it's our very lives at risk.
Again, that was Chris Brown. She's the president of Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. What are your thoughts here? Is she right? I mean, why is it so hard to get the right people into office who'd be enacting simple reforms on gun safety?
It's no secret that there are big structural challenges to our government that don't make them as representative as we'd like. And although a majority of gun owners, majority of both Democrats and Republicans support common sense gun laws, state legislators and Congress have refused to act. I will say that we're coming on a year anniversary of the Bipartisan Safer Community Act, which was a significant gun law that Congress passed. And we're excited that Senator Murphy on June 16th will be rallying people in Hartford, Connecticut to implement this law and to get ready for the next wave of legislation. But the fact is that a small minority of gun lobbyists and people that are interested in selling as many guns as possible have really made it difficult for us to pass the strong gun laws that we know that will work. And I feel for the mayors that you talk about up top, that they can do their best and they're held responsible for the shootings in their communities. But because of preemption laws, mostly conservatives have taken away the right of cities to write their own gun laws. And so it has to happen at the state and federal level.
To what do you attribute the failure of simple gun reform. Do you think it is the gun lobby? What is it at this point? And do you think it's just a pipe dream? Do you think we'll ever see simple gun safety measures pass?
I don't think it's a pipe dream. I do believe the corporate gun lobby, they worked for decades to be able to spread these really terrifying lies or myths, such as that guns make you safer, the Second Amendment doesn't allow us to write any gun regulations, and that only a good guy with a gun can stop a bad guy with a gun. And using lots of donations, the NRA and others were able to convince members of Congress and some very vocal one-issue voters that there's no way we can compromise to save lives. And even though the NRA is now being weakened, I think these myths are pervasive. But I know that as we continue to grow our movement and include new voices like the AAPI community and the Latino community, and especially young voters who are showing up to the polls time and time again, demanding that elected officials either pass on our gun laws or get out of the way and be replaced by someone that will. I know we will win, but it's a tough battle ahead, and we need as many people joining us as possible.
Yeah, it really is a tough battle ahead. But Nick, we do appreciate all the work that you've been doing on this front, and thank you so much for wearing orange today. Nick Wilson is the Senior Director for Gun Violence Prevention at the Center for American Progress. Nick, thank you so much. So to come on Scripps News Live, the FDA sounding the alarm over a shortage of a critical drug. Why there might be a shortage of chemotherapy drugs right now across the country. And we want to hear from you. You can always give us a call on our Scripps News Viewer hotline toll free. That number right there on your screen is 833-4SCRIPPS. Again, it's 833-472-7477. You are free to share your comments and your story ideas. We'll be right back.
Mom, we're so glad you're feeling better. You gave us such a scare.
I know, honey. Me too. But I want you to know I'm at peace with my home going when my time is up. And did I also tell you that I got coverage for my funeral so you and your brother would not have to worry about expenses?
I didn't know you were saving money for your final expenses.
I haven't. I called Open Care, and with one phone call, I was eligible for $30,000 for my funeral and final expenses.
That's wonderful, Mom. But how did you pass your medical exam with your health condition? Oh, that's the best part. No medical exam is needed.
That's right. And my rates can never increase, my benefits will not decrease, and my coverage will never be canceled.
Mom, I'm so glad you called.
You can now get up to $30,000 in life insurance coverage to help pay for your funeral and other final expenses. There's no medical exam, and you can be enrolled with just one phone call. Your rates can never be increased, your benefits can never be decreased, and your coverage can never be canceled. Call the number on your screen now and see how a final expense life insurance plan can help you. We don't want to leave our loved ones with debt. The cost of a funeral can be $8,000 or more. A final expense life insurance plan will pay up to $30,000, which can be used for funeral and other final expenses. Call 800-915-6980 now for your free information. You can now get up to $30,000 in life insurance coverage to help pay for your funeral and other final expenses. There's no medical exam, and you can be enrolled with just one phone call. Your rates can never be increased, your benefits can never be decreased, and your coverage can never be canceled. Call the number on your screen now and see how a final expense life insurance plan can help you. There's no obligation. Call 800-915-6980. That's 800-915-6980.
There's a lot to watch on TV these days. Problem is, most streaming options are incredibly pricey, and you'll end up paying for the local channels you can get for free. Luckily, there's a solution. Sling is only $40 a month. And you get awesome stuff like sports, news, and today's hottest TV for half of what the other guys cost. If you already get free locals with an antenna, now you can easily add the channels you're missing with Sling. It's the TV you love for a price you'll love. Visit sling.com/antenna to learn more.
Shopping for Father's Day is hard.
Actually, it's easy.
You never know what to get him.
Just give me steak.
It has to be perfect.
Yep. Dads want steak.
Right now, Omaha Steaks is offering Dad's favorite gift package that includes 4 of our exquisite bacon-wrapped filet mignons, 4 air-chilled boneless chicken breasts, boneless pork chops, jumbo Frank's dessert, and more. All for just $99.99. Save 61%. Order today at omahasteaks.com/TV, and you'll get 8 burgers free.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
curious about trick plays and if ever
That local hero, national champ, now he's home and expected to save it for you.
Hey guys, am I dreaming or can we actually win this thing?
There's a better way to begin your mornings.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Morning Rush.
On the stories that will shape each day.
There's a new study that might make you feel a little bit better.
So you can get on with yours. Morning Rush. Weekday mornings starting at 7, 6 Central. Only on Scripps News.
Right now, the FDA is reporting shortages of more than a dozen cancer drugs across the country, and it's forcing doctors to make difficult decisions about how they treat their patients. Scripps News correspondent Stephanie Sandoval explains what this all means for cancer patients and the efforts to prevent future shortages.
Key chemotherapy drugs are under shortage. The list has grown to 14, according to the FDA, and doctors are sounding the alarm.
These are life-threatening shortages. Some hospitals are completely out.
Dr. Eleonora Toplinsky, an oncologist based out of New Jersey, treats women with breast and gynecologic cancer. One of the drugs in short supply is called carboplatin, often used to treat breast cancer, as well as ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, and lung cancer. She says she's fortunate that her hospital still has the drug, but she worries it might not last. Some hospitals are having to ration their supply and delay treatment for some patients, which could be life-threatening.
To tell a patient that we have this great treatment and it's going to work, but we can't give it to you because it's in short supply is really, I think, one of the hardest things.
Drug shortages are nothing new. Drugs are under a shortage all the time. But according to a report from the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, drug shortages are at a record high. The report says new drug shortages increased by nearly 30% between 2021 and 2022.
We have not seen a shortage like this on this scale, at least in the last 10 years that I can recall.
Clinical trials that depend on these drugs could also be put at risk.
How is that going to impact the data if we can't give patients the drug that they need? So the repercussions are really immense.
Doctors are also asking why. Why are these drug shortages happening? Dr. Arif Kamal with the American Cancer Society told Scripps News newer drugs don't generally face drug shortages. It's the tried and true drugs that eventually come off patent, which then allows other companies to produce generic versions, bringing in new competition, hurting the original maker's bottom line, incentivizing companies to make newer drugs instead, reducing production on the less profitable ones.
What is not clear is as a drug comes off patent, what is the strategy to ensure that there's a continued uninterrupted supply chain of drug that aligns with the economic incentives that a manufacturer would need to ensure that exists?
That'll require action from Congress. Angels for Change, an advocacy group whose mission is to end drug shortages, gave testimony in a hearing last month before the House Energy and Commerce Committee. During the hearing, Laura Bray, the organization's founder, said transparency is needed to prevent drug shortages from happening.
This marketplace is deeply fragmented. Everyone, I think, talked about transparency today. We do need transparency. There's gaps in knowledge, and until we have a clear picture, we can't address the right solutions for the right problems.
She also says collaboration is needed.
It includes the FDA, it includes the supply chain members, it includes the manufacturers and the hospitals. How do we align our incentives to get as many patients the needed drugs that they deserve? And that's, the one message I want to say. We need to be connected and collaborate, but then there needs to be tools of connectivity so we can scale.
And there's still no word on when exactly these shortages will end. In a statement, the FDA told me while it can't require a pharmaceutical company to make a drug and make more of it, it's working with multiple manufacturers and others in the supply chain to understand what's going on so it can help reduce the impact these shortages have. It also added manufacturers expect drug supply to increase in the near future. Stephanie Sandoval, Scripps News.
Still ahead on Scripps News Live. Take a look at that. From 229 spellers all the way down to just one. It is a moment that this year's National Spelling Bee champ says that he has worked so hard for.
It's surreal. I didn't even let it settle in, and I don't know, my legs are still shaking.
Oh, coming up next on Scripps News Live, we're going to share the word that scored him the trophy and that $50,000 prize.
Attention all Medicare recipients. Did you know you could be adding up to $164 back to your Social Security check every month? Certain beneficiaries qualify for specific benefits based on income verification. Get a free Medicare benefits review and see if you qualify. Just call 800-396-0918. This program helps lower Medicare costs like premiums, deductibles, and coinsurance. You may also qualify for a Medicare Advantage plan with additional benefits at no cost to you. A licensed insurance agent is standing by to check your eligibility. Just call 800-396-0918. You could be adding up to $164 back to your Social Security check every month. Certain beneficiaries qualify for specific benefits based on income verification. You don't get these savings automatically. Call now. There is no obligation to enroll. The call and Medicare benefits review are free. That's 800-396-0918. Attention all Medicare recipients. Did you know you could be adding up to $164 back to your Social Security check every month? Certain beneficiaries qualify for specific benefits based on income verification. Get a free Medicare benefits review and see if you qualify. Just call 800-396-0918. This program helps lower Medicare costs like premiums, deductibles, and coinsurance. You may also qualify for a Medicare Advantage plan with additional benefits at no cost to you. A licensed insurance agent is standing by to check your eligibility. You could be adding up to $164 back to your Social Security check every month. Certain beneficiaries qualify for specific benefits based on income verification. You don't get these savings automatically. Call now. There is no obligation to enroll. The call and Medicare benefits review are free. Just call 800-396-0918. That's 800-396-0918.
Every detail counts. That's why I live my life with Lexi B2 hearing aids powered by Bose. I value quality, cutting-edge tech, and performance. When I began experiencing hearing loss, I knew I needed the best of the best. Lexi B2 hearing aids powered by Bose are app-controlled and self-fitting, which means I can tune and customize them to my needs and preferences on the Lexi app and enjoy high-quality hearing. No appointment necessary. From ordering my first pair online to front door delivery and the secure, discreet fit. Lexi B2 hearing aids powered by Bose offer quality, convenience, and exceptional customer support at every step in my journey. If you're ready to elevate to the next level with world-class hearing, take the lead and call or order online at lexihearing.com to receive your Lexi B2 hearing aids powered by Bose today.
Call 800-461-0637 today to find out how you can get your Lexis at 80% less than prescription hearing aid prices.
Take a look at this. Look at these two adorable little baby penguins at the Syracuse Zoo. Look at them. They're just so comfortable in the water. Their names, Alfredo, Fernando, and they're just learning how to swim, believe it or not. Zookeepers say that these chicks are almost ready to swim in the 50,000-gallon pool in the zoo's Penguin Coast exhibit. So if you're in the area, you probably want to book your tickets right now. Too cute. After several days of competition, hundreds of spellers and thousands of words, one bee went home with all of that honey. The Scripps National Spelling Bee crowned 14-year-old Dev Shaw as the 2023 champion last night. Scripps News correspondent Maya Rodriguez witnessed the teen buzz his way to victory, one word at a time.
What a night. We had spelling, we had word definitions, we had drama, and in the end, we had a champion.
And we are coming to you live from just outside Washington, D.C.
With 11 finalists on stage, it took 15 rounds of spelling for this year's Spelling Bee champion to finally emerge. Dev Shaw winning it all in his third year at the Bee. And the final year he could qualify to compete.
It's kind of a dream come true, but I can't tell if I'm dreaming.
The winning word? Samophile, an organism that thrives in sandy areas. An appropriate word for the new bee champion from the coastal community of Largo, Florida. Getting to this point, though, meant beating out 229 other competitors in the bee and his fellow finalists. When it came down to the final two competitors, bee officials placed a buzzer on stage, but in the end, a spell-off was not needed.
We've all been through this in the last 3 days. It's been a wild week.
But even before this week of spelling, he says, it took a lot of hard work.
This last month, I kind of made a lot of sacrifices. Like if there were field trips, but I knew it wouldn't be worth it.
And that confidence paid off, earning him a $50,000 grand prize. But there is one thing the new bee champion is now really looking forward to the most.
Sleeping, because there have been a lot of sleepless nights recently. I'm just really happy, and I'm just thinking about what's next. I know I always say focus on the next step, but I guess now I'm excited to see what's next.
Something that I wanted to point out that people at home didn't get a chance to see actually happened during the commercial breaks, and that's when we would see the 11 finalists on stage chatting with each other and encouraging each other. Dev told us that they actually all became friends over the course of this week, and that is part of what makes the bee so special every year. Maya Rodriguez, Scripps News, National Harbor, Maryland.
And a big, big congratulations to Deb Shaw. So Friday nights are all about women's basketball on ION. You don't want to miss a double dose of WNBA action. It all starts at 8 p.m. with the Las Vegas Aces and the Atlanta Dream. And then the Los Angeles Sparks will face the Phoenix Murray. That happens at 10. So don't miss your shot to catch these two matchups back-to-back. You can head over to IONWNBA.com for more viewing details. Coming up next on Scripps News Live, we're going to have new details about the death of Jeffrey Epstein inside a New York City jail 4 years ago. What we've learned about that investigation. I'm Veronica Cruz. Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't go too far because Chris Stewart is up next.